does not repudiate suffering in itself. He wills it. He even seeks it out, provided that he has shown a meaning for it. Hello and welcome. This is John on behalf of xenotheory.org, and I want to thank you for choosing to be here and watch this video. I'm making this video today because I believe, in my experience, these are the three most influential ideas that are keeping people in states of psychological distress, meaning depression, nihilism, pessimism, pervasive thoughts of suicide, etc. In my experience, these are three major obstacles that I had to overcome. It took me several years to really consolidate these into some principles. And also, coincidentally, I additionally noticed this in a lot of people that I have talked to in terms of evaluating their experience as well. I found a lot of congruences between my journey and people's journey that are going from misery to mastery, from suffering to strength. So the three ideas are as follows. The first obstacle that is keeping a lot of people depressed is a poor self-image. The second idea is a lack of an ideal. The third idea is stagnation. So we're going to go through these sequentially. The first idea that is keeping a lot of people depressed is a poor self-image. This is an inferiority complex. And in a lot of ways, this can manifest in terms of feeling guilty when we want to establish an ideal for ourselves. We want to design a life that is that has the possibility for fulfillment, for happiness. A lot of people, when we start to have a taste of that, if you have an inferiority complex, you feel like you are not worthy of attention, of affection, of success, of meaning, fulfillment, whatever the positive circumstance happens to be. A lot of people inherently feel like they don't deserve those things. And for me, this manifested in a multitude of ways. Firstly, in every single relationship, whether it be friendships or a romantic relationship, I was always the one taking the blame for any situation that was going wrong, any obstacle in terms of the relationship. I always took responsibility for. The burden was always on me. And the logic was as follows. I looked at myself. I had such a bad case of an inferiority complex. I had such a poor value judgment of myself. I had such a bad relationship with myself that I inherently felt that I was not worthy of affection or attention. And if somebody were to show me those things, first of all, I was extremely skeptical. I thought they were lying. I thought they were trying to manipulate or exploit me or embarrass me, or it was a prank or something like that in the future. So that was one idea. The second idea is, even if I got over that skepticism of you're playing a trick on me or something, I felt like, okay, I'm such a burden to be around. Therefore, they must be such a kind and noble and benevolent person that I would put them on a pedestal. Therefore, nothing they could do would be wrong. Nothing they could do would be their fault. That's why I would take all of the blame in every single situation and every single dynamic. I was always the one apologizing, constantly saying sorry for things. I never felt like I was worthy of anything. It would also manifest in terms of birthdays. I didn't like celebrating my birthday. If somebody went out of their way and got me a thoughtful gift, I had this guilt complex arise in me. And I said, I don't deserve these. You shouldn't have done this for me. It wouldn't really sit well with me. So I kind of just felt like I was a burden to be around. And I want to make a brief reference to a fictional example of this inferiority complex. If anybody has read Kafka's Metamorphosis, it's a brilliant example of somebody in states of psychological turmoil and distress, and kind of dealing with all of the struggles that accompany that. So Gregor, who, as we know, is the main character, he was transformed, he underwent the metamorphosis, hence the title, into a monstrous vermin. This is frequently represented as a cockroach. And it's obviously symbolic to represent an inferiority complex. And his family were to come in his room and he would physically hide. He didn't want to be seen. He felt like he was such a physical distress. He would cause physical distress to people if they even witnessed him. So when they would come in his room, he would hide under the sofa. He would hide himself under a sheet. There was another instance where his sister brought him a pallet of food and he didn't like any of the options that were on the pallet. But there's a quote in there verbatim. It says he would rather starve than bring it to her attention. So that's an inferiority complex in action. You feel like you're a burden on a lot of people. You feel like you're not worth other people going out of their way for. You feel like you're not worthy of really anything. Like I said, it usually manifests in attention, affection, at least for me it did. And I was always constantly apologizing for everything. And we know that this inferiority complex, just like a superiority complex, it's all subjective. It's telling yourself a hypothesis and your mind is going to fill in the blank. So example, your mind is going to fill in the blank with if you say, I hate myself because, or I'm not worthy of love because, or I ruin every relationship I'm in because, your mind will fill in that blank just as readily and rapidly as if you said, I love myself because I'm proud of these things that I've done. I deserve the best. I deserve success, fulfillment, meaning, happiness, success, joy, wealth, because your mind will fill in each of those blanks accordingly. But a lot of people are providing their mind unconsciously because of their environmental influences, which are very, very malicious and unproductive, which we're going to get into with design. A lot of people are filling their minds with this negative hypothesis. I hate myself because I always mess things up because they're going into every single new relationship with, this isn't going to work. Subconsciously, this isn't going to work because everything I touch fails. Everything I touch is a disaster. Therefore, I'm just looking for little signs. I'm looking for little opportunities to really skew this entire dynamic. And then when it ultimately fails, because of my subconscious efforts, I'm going to say, ha, boom, right there. I knew it was destined to fail. I knew they were lying to me. I knew they were going to exploit me. I knew this was going to end in disaster because they were looking for that thing subconsciously. So I think it's very important for us to question our narratives that we are telling ourselves, question our self-image, and, sequentially learn to build a healthier relationship with ourselves. And a way to do this is actually going to transition into the second idea, because it's a way to approach this, which is the second obstacle is having no ideal, meaning having no ultimate goal which you are aiming for at the current moment. Now, this goal is, of course, dynamic. It could be in 1 year's time. It could be in 5 years' time. It depends on individual temperaments, of course. But I do think there's a lot of very important insights that we can extract from the process of designing our ideal. First of all, going back to the first idea, it's going to build a healthier self-image for us. So if I establish my ideal, like my perfect version of myself in every aspect of my life, my health, my wealth, relationships, my career, my romantic relationships, my hobbies, my relationship with myself, all of these things, I write out my ideal, my perfect version. If everything were to go perfectly, if I could wave a magic wand and have everything that I wanted in that category of my life, what would it be? I write it down on paper and I work deductively. What I do is I act as if I was already that person in possession of those things. So I ask myself questions like, how would this person show up? How would this person introduce himself? How would this person act in public? How would this person dress? What would this person eat? I go to very, very meticulous details and I act as if I am already that person. And if you do this long enough and frequently enough, it'll change the relationship you have with yourself. You will start to see yourself as a winner. You'll build this winner's image and you'll start to believe that you are actually this person. And then you're going to look for opportunities to prove yourself right in that way, instead of the old inferiority complex of, I'm not worthy of love because everything I touch crumbles and destroys itself. Because instead of those things, you're saying, I'm worthy of these things that I wrote on this paper because. And you're also going to look for little opportunities that are going to get you closer to this. The second big reason why we should establish our own ideal is to justify all of the suffering that is inherently related to existence. So we all know that obviously everybody is going to die. We are going to lose people. Everybody is going to experience some degree, some iota, some vestige of malevolence, of manipulation, of exploitation from other people, of embarrassment, of shame, of guilt, of just frankly evil people. And that's on top of all of the burdens we are already currently dealing with. So there's a lot of chaos in the world, in short. And to justify this chaos, we need some sort of ideal to look at the necessary dealing with that chaos as an investment to get to that ideal. So I want to read a part from Genealogy of Morals by Nietzsche that beautifully articulates this point. He says, man, the bravest animal and the one most inured to suffering, does not repudiate suffering in itself. He wills it. He even seeks it out, provided that he is shown a meaning for it. A purpose of suffering, a justification, in other words. Not suffering, but the senselessness of suffering is the curse which lay spread over humanity. So that's kind of his argument toward like closing the door toward all suicidal nihilism. He says you should establish your ideal because senseless suffering is going to lead to this nihilistic, pessimistic, pervasive thoughts of suicide and depression, etc. So that's one major reason why we should establish our ideal, because it's going to justify all of the necessary steps that we're going to take in the interim. So simple example, something that's very uncomfortable. Exercise. itself is very uncomfortable. But if we have a goal, if that goal is going to get us more positive rewards than the negative rewards of the actual exercise, or the negative implications of the actual exercise, we will gladly sacrifice. We will gladly go to the gym. We will gladly, be disciplined with our diet, etc. If we look at that positive end result, right? The ends is going to justify the means, right? So that's the similar idea of establishing our ideal. The third major important reason we should establish our ideal. So the first is the self-image thing. The second is to justify the suffering. The third is because I think it's implicitly dangerous to live the other way around, meaning by pure proximity. So if we don't have our ideal, we don't know what we're looking for. Therefore, we can be manipulated and influenced and coerced into doing things for other people, and we'll never actually truly live to express our individuality and explore our unique traits and idiosyncrasies and talents and strengths and all of these things. We're never going to do that unless we have an ideal. So living by proximity as an alternative would be like just being manipulated by other people. And I think it's especially important and dangerous today because we are all subject to literally thousands of opinions every single day. If we have social media, it's on the news, it's on TV, it's in music, it's on Instagram, it's on Facebook. Now there is some level of control we can express here in terms of who we follow, in terms of what TV we watch, what music, of course, a little bit, but there's always going to be some destructive or irrelevant data that's going to enter our consciousness. If we're not careful, that can really influence us. And I think it's dangerous to pick the most comfortable or expedient option based out of our options in front of us, because if you look at statistics, this can be proved that the majority of people are unhappy. So there's a recent report where I think it's like 67 or 70% of Americans report themselves as unhappy. So why would I want to be influenced by their paradigms, by their ideals, by their perspectives, by their ways of life if the majority of them are unhappy? I wouldn't want to do that. That's not a safe, I wouldn't take those odds, in short. And this is not just happiness. There's finances. A lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. A lot of people don't have savings. A lot of people are out of shape. A lot of people, you can look at this, you can make a very solid and sound statistical argument against proximity. So I think it's very important. So those are three main ideas for, three main reasons for designing our ideal. Now, moving on into the third idea that is keeping a lot of people in psychological distress: stagnation. So not taking action on our ideas. And I want to give another fictional reference to embody this idea. And this is from Dante's Inferno in Canto 3. And if you haven't read Dante's Inferno, it's very simple. A lot of people inherently know the idea behind it. There's 9 concentric layers of hell, and each layer of hell is attributed to a specific punishment for a sin that somebody engaged in their mortal life. So the vestibule of hell, the outermost layer, is full of people who they weren't necessarily like these kind-hearted, noble, benevolent people, but they also weren't really evil or malevolent either. They kind of just like stayed in the middle of life. They went with the flow. They lived by proximity, going back to the second idea. They lived by proximity. They were passively existing instead of actively living. They didn't take any risks. They didn't really express what they felt about the world. They didn't speak their mind. They didn't speak their truth. They didn't take action on what they believed to be right and moral. So their punishment for stagnation, I would argue that was their sin, would be stagnation. Their punishment was they were stripped naked, and they were stung exceedingly by gadflies and hornets, I believe the line is. And if that wasn't enough, which by the way, I look at that as an external gesture to move them into action, because they were incapable of doing that from an internal perspective. They weren't able to move themselves into action. They were stagnating. So they have to have some external aid to push them or like to run from. If that wasn't enough of a punishment, they were also chasing a blank flag to represent the lack of justification for all of their motion, right? They're just moving, they're running in the treadmill, they're doing a lot of things and they're going nowhere. There's nothing to show for their actions. And that's a nightmare, really. So it's a very, very vivid and influential idea, so much so that I've actually designed a tattoo for myself to have this idea as a perpetual reminder to always act on my ideas. So I think a big obstacle keeping people from executing on their ideas is the fear of failure or fear of criticism, or just in short, a poor relationship with failure in itself. Now, this is very overemphasized to the point of a cliche in like the personal development and self-help realm. You have to fail forward. a lot of people look at failure as, oh, no, I did something wrong. Successful people are people who just win all the time. That is not true. And this reminds me of the old adage that the master has failed more times than the amateur has even attempted. There's a lot of wisdom and a lot of veracity behind that statement. It's extremely true. So we have to execute on our ideas. We have to fail forward. And if you fail, you're simply finding a way that hasn't worked. So to reframe this psychologically, look at it as when you take an action, you either win, you get the tangible result of what you wanted to get, or you get the intangible result of experience, of insight, of understanding a way that doesn't work, or you've mapped out a boundary where you can go and develop your weakness on, right? So you get a tangible result of the success, or you get an intangible result, a benefit of learning. So you can either win or learn. It sounds very cliche. I know I've heard that statement a lot of times. There's no failure, there's only winning or learning, but with the correct perspective, that is absolutely true. So in summation, those are the three ideas that in my inherent youth and upbringing in life were keeping me locked in a state of psychological distress, as well as a lot of people that I've talked to. So to reiterate, it is a poor self-image, it is inferiority complex, a lack of an ideal or a lack of a goal, a lack of direction, a lack of like what we're looking for, having something to look for. The third obstacle to fulfillment and success and happiness and fulfillment and meaning is stagnation. So not executing our ideas, not speaking our truth, not saying what we think is right, not acting what we believe we should act on in the world. Out of usually, like I said, usually out of fear of criticism or fear of failure or having a bad relationship with failure. So for more information on how to actively apply these three ideas to your life with different contexts and nuances and circumstantial evidence and everything like this, as well as more actual principles I was able to find in my journey, as well as consolidating a lot of research I've done in terms of philosophy, psychology, and other people's circumstantial experiences, I would invite you to consider enrollment into coaching, one-on-one coaching. I do have programs I'm opening up as early as next week for a few individual slots. Everything is available on the website xenotheory.org. So, hope to see you over there. Thank you for watching.